In this video, we're going to look at the concept of situational leadership. And this is different from the previous leadership styles that I've mentioned in the videos that we previously uploaded to the YouTube site, where we've looked at things like transactional leadership and transformational leadership, which are all different styles that a leader can adopt and ones that they can impose upon the teams that they manage. So in those instances, the leadership style has affected the rest of the team and affects the situation. Whereas with situational leadership, the situation affects the style that the manager or the leader uses. And if you want to see more of these videos, if you want to look at those other videos that I've already mentioned, then please like and subscribe. And the concept of situational leadership is that no one-size-all management or leadership works. It will change depending on the situation. It's up to you as the leader to understand that situation and to adapt to that situation. So let's take a look at Lucy. Now, Lucy manages a team of managers. She leads them. They're all very experienced. They're all very knowledgeable. So it's better for Lucy to take a hands-off approach, let her managers that she is leading operate how they see fit, because they are skilled, they have experience, they're reliable, they're responsible, they don't need micromanaging. Now, if Lucy were to move and work in an organization that required a much more autocratic approach because the people that they were supervising were working on a very process-driven or a very task-oriented opportunity, then perhaps she would need to adapt her approach, because that hands-off approach of letting them get on with it may not be appropriate. So let's further expand on that by looking at leadership in different contexts. Because of course, leaders can be found in all walks of life, in personal life, in social lives, in business life, etc. And the same approach may not always be appropriate. So let's take a look at where you might need a different style of leadership. Now, for example, a vicar may need to take a very personal approach, a caring approach when leading their congregation. The same for a nurse or someone that is working in a very people-orientated environment. Now, an army sergeant may need a completely different approach. If you're on a battlefield and there's all sorts of things going on, it's a very, very high-risk situation. There's no time for talking things out and getting people involved in the decision-making process, etc. You have to be very strict. A very no-nonsense approach needs to be adopted, and any kind of insubordination needs to be dealt with very, very quickly. You have to make quick, decisive, direct decisions and expect them to be followed there and then. So in these two different situations, a very different approach is needed. Now, it's not to say one approach is better than the other, it's just one is more appropriate for the situation. And it can even be different at different times within the same role. So, for example, going back to the army sergeant that's making all the decisions on the battlefield. Now, after the battle, when everyone's back at the barracks, etc., and they have to digest what's happened and run reports on the engagement, etc., perhaps certain friends, colleagues, etc., have been injured or even worse on the battlefield. Now is not the time for the sergeant to be very, very strict. They need to be empathetic. They need to consider the fact that everyone is hurting, everyone is upset, and they need to adopt a more caring approach. So the same profession, the same person in the same profession, same job, has had to adopt different approaches at these different times. And this is what situational theories are all about. That no one right model of leadership is always appropriate in every situation. It's more about adopting your own approach based on the needs of the situation. And one of the leading models on situational leadership is that of Feidler's situational leadership. And it suggested that leaders tend to have very different leadership styles, but they will need to adapt these for the different situations. And he identified where certain styles would be more appropriate using what is known as the least preferred co-worker score. And the best way to demonstrate this is to think of it as a graph, and on the y-axis you have the least preferred co-worker score. Now you can be low on this particular chart or you can be high. Now if you have a high least preferred co-worker score, it means that you have a very close relationship with your staff. It's a very human relations orientation. You care about getting to know your staff. Your main focus is on developing your staff. Your main focus is on people in general. Whereas if you have a very low LPC score, you're very distant, you're very hands-off. You have a very task-orientated approach. You don't care about getting to know your staff. You don't care about developing your staff. You just care about getting the job done. Now, what is interesting here is that whilst you may look at this and think that having a high LPC score is better, it's better to have a human relations orientation, etc., the actual point of it in this model is that neither a high or a low LPC score is always best. In fact, it depends entirely on the situation, whether it is a favorable situation for all involved or an unfavorable situation for all involved. And the situation can be defined, according to this model, using several situational factors. We're going to take a look at those now. And those three main factors in the Fiedler model is the leader and the member relations. And this means how well respected the leader is and the relationships they have. Do they have a good, close relationship or not? It also depends on the task structure. Now, the better the structure of the task, the less debate is needed, the less discussion is needed. It's clear that everyone knows what they are doing. Now, it's a favorable situation when everyone knows what they are doing, what is expected of them, and the extent to which they can just get on with their job. It's unfavorable if no one knows what they're doing, what their responsibilities are is not clear, what is expected of them is not clear, what is considered a job done situation is not clear, etc. And the final situational factor is the leader's power position. So this looks at the ability to have authority to make decisions. Now, in an unfavorable situation, they don't have much power to change anything. In a more favorable situation, they do have the power to change things. They have the power to affect things, and they can have a positive input on the situation. And the Fiedler model suggests that whether or not a leader should be close or distant depends on whether these situational factors are favorable or not favorable. So let's return to the graph, and now we're going to put on an x-axis for the situation. Now, it could be that you have a favorable situation or an unfavorable situation. But in a favorable situation, what does a favorable situation look like? Well, there is clear tasks, there is clear power, there's good relations, there's no need for debate. So here, a low LPC leader is actually better. It's better to adopt a distant style because everyone knows what they need to do. Everyone can be expected and relied upon to get on with it. The relationships are good. Now, going back to the beginning of this video, this is the situation that Lucy was in. where she managed a team of managers. They all knew what they were doing. They all knew what was expected of them. They were all very responsible and experienced, and they had the skills. It was better to just let them get on with their job. Don't micromanage them. Don't bother them on a daily basis, etc. Just let them get on with their job. But what about a moderately favorable situation? Well, a moderately favorable situation is where, of those situational factors that we discussed, one or more of them has not been met. They're favorable in a couple, but maybe not favorable in one. So, for example, maybe the power is high, the tasks are clear, but the relationships are poor. Or the relationships are good, the power is high, but the tasks are not clear. Now here, the best thing is to be a high LPC leader, where a more close style management is preferred in order to help build trust, to build loyalty, to get people on board. So, for example, let's say that there is a new restaurant opening up and there's a new manager at it. Now, workers at this restaurant, they're going to know what they need to do because it's a restaurant, they're producing food, there's a clear structure, clear procedures in the case of food safety, etc. And the manager has a lot of power. They have the power to hire, fire, reward, punish employees as they see fit. So we can see that the tasks are clear and the power is high, but the relationships are poor. They may not trust the new manager. They may dislike them, etc. So in order to turn this moderately favorable situation into a favorable situation, the manager needs to get more involved. They need to learn about their employees, build a relationship with their employees to gain that trust. So adopting a more people relationship orientated leadership style is more appropriate here. So that's why you have the high LPC score. Now, what about in an unfavorable situation where neither of the situational factors, all three of the situational factors are unfavorable? There's poor relations, no power, completely unclear task. What would you do in this situation? Well, the best approach here is to adopt a low LPC leader approach, because there is no value in trying to build a relationship here. The best thing that you can do here is take full control and dictate the direction. You're not going to be able to establish a clear task structure. You're not going to be able to build relations, etc. So just adopt a clear approach. And an example of this would be a leader being brought in to a failing project team on the final week of the project. Now, it's going to be too late, too difficult to build any kind of team spirit, any kind of relationship here. They are already going to fail the project, so it's obviously not clear what the tasks were. So the best thing that you can do here is just take a very autocratic, task-centered approach and get as much done as possible with the resources that you have available in that final week. There's no point in trying to build relationships at this stage. So what we can see here from looking at this model is that the type of approach that you are taking, whether you're taking a people-focused approach, a transformational approach, or whether you're taking a distant task-orientated transactional approach, doesn't depend on your skills as a leader. It depends on the situation. Now, in a moderately favorable situation, taking a people-based approach was best. If you took a low LPC approach, a task-orientated approach, it would have failed, because here it was important that you built relationships. So having a distant approach would not have been appropriate. Whereas in a favorable situation where everyone already knows what they're doing, everyone's getting on with it, taking a very close human relations orientated based approach may not have been effective. You might have actually bothered the people that were working under you because they actually want to just get on with their work rather than discussing how they can develop, etc. Likewise, taking a very close human relations based approach here where you just need to get as much done as possible in a short space of time would not be appropriate either. You wouldn't end up getting anything done, and in this situation there was no scope for building relationships and building team spirit anyway. It would have been a waste of time. So based on this model, you need to identify the situation. This is what it means for you, is to identify the situations with the various different teams that you lead and adapt your approach based on that. To make sure you are giving space to people that already know what they're doing and want to get on with it. Make sure you're building relationships with people who do know what they're doing, but they perhaps just need a bit more trust in you as a leader. And with a team that there's just no chance of building a relationship, it's a waste of time. So take a task-based approach. So that brings us to the end of this short video on situational leadership. I hope you have enjoyed it and found it useful. I hope you now have a good idea of why situational leadership is important and just why you might need to adopt your approach, because one size of management, one size of leadership does not fit all. We've also gone through that model there, which gives you a few key pointers of identifying the situation you are in and what would be the most appropriate response in that situation. So if you have liked this video, please like and subscribe. We are going to be posting a lot of videos about leadership and management and teamwork, etc., and how that's going to improve you as a manager or a leader. So do like and subscribe so that you can see those. And also take a look at the other ones that we have posted already. So I'll say goodbye for now and hope to see you again soon.